Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On our Game Day segment in just a minute, we will be joined by editor John Borton from the Wolverine magazine. First, a few of my thoughts to get us started, though. This weekend, we will learn if Michigan athletics can resume next week. If all goes well and the decision is favorable, we can start practice possibly this weekend for all sports affected. Just think how grueling it is for these student athletes, though. They know what their university is doing is in their best interests, but it's still hard to accept. All of our winter sports teams have had 0 positive tests for months, yet they have been shut down. It has to be mentally and physically frustrating. So let's hope that whoever makes the decision about resuming play gives them the all clear this weekend. My guest today says he still thinks Juwan Howards' team can be in the thick of the Big Ten race and have a very special end to the season. He also shares his thoughts with us on all of the changes this offseason for Jim Harbaugh and his team. Up next on our Game Day segment is John Borton from the Wolverine magazine on this week's edition of The Michigan Man. So stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment to talk Michigan hoops, football, and maybe some other stuff is editor John Borton from the Wolverine. John, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. It's always good to be with you.
Well, John, we're a week into the stoppage of all Michigan athletics, and if all goes well, we could get the go-ahead to resume action, I don't know, maybe over the weekend, February 7th. Not sure what the date is, but whatever it is, it's not written in stone, is it?
No, it really isn't like anything else these days, and that's part of the problem. It's just, really a gut punch for Michigan athletics as a whole, but in particular, you're talking about these two basketball teams that were going so well, the men's and the women's teams that were off to a couple of the best starts in the history of the programs. And all of a sudden, despite the fact that they weren't having issues with COVID, they jumped through all the hoops. They done what they needed to do, kept safe, and they're told you can't play, and we'll tell you when you can again. And so that's very, very difficult because they are left in limbo, and I know there are a lot of frustrated young men and women out there that go beyond the basketball teams, but we don't know. There's a lot of we don't know these days.
Oh, for sure. And I guess one of the things I'm unclear on is who is going to give us the go-ahead. Does the medical staff clear it with Washtenaw County, the state health department? Who makes the decision?
Well, I mean, the state claims, as you know, that this was not us. And Michigan is looking at them and saying, "Are you kidding me?" Not in these terms, but they're saying, it's certainly what the recommendation, quote unquote, that we received sounded like a mandate. So we were acting on that. I think it has to come from the higher ups at Michigan beyond the athletic department in conjunction with the medical staff. But it's so nebulous in some ways because it was based on these other strains of the virus, and you get one infected from one sport, and then you're shutting down everything. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, if you are wanting to err on the side of extreme caution, maybe you don't ever do anything. Maybe you shut it down for the rest of the year. But I think most people think that's over the top. That's overreach. Right. And hopefully they've gotten the kind of input that will tell them, look, if it's just like it was in the football season. Michigan's football team did a great job of staying safe, of going through all the protocols and taking all the daily testing, and they were able to basically put together half a season then it started to get to where you needed to shut it down, and they did. But my question remains: why are you shutting down programs that have absolutely no issues in terms of positive tests?
I know it's very frustrating for fans. I mean, all you have to do is look around the country in the SEC, ACC, Pac-12, and they're doing, not everyone, but some schools are doing it different. If there's a positive tracing or positive tests, they're doing 48-hour stoppages. And yet we're hearing here in Michigan that we're following the science and the data. And you wonder, what are they doing in the Southeast and the West when they don't do the same thing?
Well, exactly. And right in the Big Ten Conference. I mean, Purdue had a player the night before the Michigan game that had tested positive. All right, he's set aside, and he goes through into the quarantine and heals, and yet they play on. And the same with every school right now in the Big Ten, or almost every school except for Michigan. I am completely in favor of doing everything we can to keep our most vulnerable safe. That goes without saying. That there's no question. You look in the stands and you see no fans, and that's because you're keeping an eye towards keeping people safe, especially in those most vulnerable groups. These 18 to 22-year-old athletes are at the peak of their condition and in one of, if not the least most vulnerable groups. And they're just wondering why they can't participate in their sport. And I don't have a good answer for them. I'm not sure that the powers that be necessarily do.
Well, momentum is so important in athletics and basketball, both men and women's, as well as hockey. We're all in a good rhythm, and that is going to be both a physical and mental challenge to jump right back into play after these 2 weeks off, isn't it?
There's no question about it. You look at what happened with Michigan State, which isn't a very good basketball team this year anyway, but they come back after 20 days off and absolutely get run right off the court against Rutgers. So, I mean, there's two ways to look at that. Michigan State was 2-4 going into that anyway, but it certainly doesn't help you when you can't practice together, when you can't keep the momentum going that you had, especially in Michigan's case, because this was a team that was on an absolute rampage that, it took it on the chin one time and then quickly adjusted to all the things that people thought they knew about Michigan, that now, okay, that's going to be a different story. Well, it wasn't, because Hunter Dickinson at the freshman sensation at center adjusted to what was being done defensively to him, and other guys were stepping up, and you see just that the dominating win down at Mackey Arena against Purdue right before all of this came down. It was, that's seriously something that is not necessarily automatic. Remember, it took some time for this team to come together in the first place. Right, they did not lose a non-conference game, and but they struggled some along the way. There was a coming together. And I talked to some of these guys now in their little bubble, and they are saying, we think we'll be able to we'll be able to bounce right back and come right back together. But we've seen it is not automatic, and I'll be very anxious to see it, and especially since on the schedule their first game back is supposed to be against Illinois, which is one of the three best teams, certainly in the Big Ten, along with Michigan and Iowa.
Well, let's say we do resume play next week against Illinois. I think that's on February 11th. We'll have missed 5 games, I believe it is, at that point. Do you think there's any chance some of those games will be made up?
I would think that there would be room for some of those games, and I've had conversation with people that have speculated, okay, this might be the year where you, in fact, do not play a Big Ten tournament, and that might allow for a little extra time, an extra week to fit some games in. And the thought there is, maybe you don't get all these teams together in one place for a big extended weekend of basketball, but you play back some of those games that you missed, and then everybody's that much more ready to go for the actual NCAA tournament and to give yourself the best chance there. I think there may be something to that. I don't know that that's going to happen, but in Michigan's case, you don't necessarily need to play back all of those games. It's just a fact that not every Big Ten team is going to play all the games that were listed on its schedules because the logistics of things aren't going to allow for that. Then the question becomes, well, who's your champion? How do you determine that? Winning percentage, what goes into that? And that's certainly something that's on Michigan's mind because, here they're sitting on one loss and in the prime position to win the Big Ten. The closest teams to them have 2 losses, and they're piling up as Michigan sits and watches its Big Ten lead gets bigger.
Well, I know the NCAA is adamant in everything they say that there will be a tournament, but the uptick in cancellations, and then we have this new virus variant. It sure makes you wonder sometimes if it's going to happen, doesn't it, John? Yeah,
well, they thought they were going to have a tournament last year.
Yeah.
That's just the thing, and that's why it made sense to me when someone said, well, maybe then you don't have the Big Ten tournament this year so that you're as ready as you can be for that. But no, there's no guarantees whatsoever. We don't have a guarantee on an NCAA tournament. We don't have a guarantee on the start of Michigan spring football. And here you've got all these new coaches that you're trying to have mesh with players and new guys coming in. We have no guarantee on anything at this point, and we have absolutely seen that. And there is that element of, you mentioned it, who's making the calls, who gets to ultimately decide, and how much of a scare do you have to have if you have a little flare up here or there to have somebody say, no, that's not happening again.
Well, as we all know very well, it's going to be a bumpy road the rest of the season, whatever happens. And it really is too bad because it sure looked like Michigan was in the process of putting together a really special kind of season, didn't it?
Oh, they worked their way up from being an unranked team to being in the top 5, being a number 4 in the nation, being a team that people were talking about and are talking about as a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, which if you just dial it back to the start of this year, how big that is, and how far they've come and what they've accomplished. Juwan Howards, in a short amount of time, has really put his stamp on this program. And the way that they have played, the way that the women's team has played, there was so much excitement. You think about how Chrysler Arena would be, or Chrysler Center, Chrysler Arena at Chrysler Center would be rocking this winter if it was a normal year and you were able to put fans in those stands. And again, let's keep it all in perspective. Mm-hmm. What matters the most here is keeping people safe, is getting through this, and I'm talking about the limited sports world in which we're dealing, in which we're talking about. But you do think that if this was a normal year, it would be a very special one inside that building.
Well, let's just hope this weekend or early next week we get the green light and can get hockey, basketball back in action, all of them having great seasons. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. As we know, that is it's a wait-and-see situation the rest of the year. On another topic, John, football has been getting its share of attention, a lot of attention this offseason. Of course, there's been Jim's extension and the coaching changes. It has been quite the shakeup, one that We Michigan fans who have been around a while, it's unlike anything we've seen, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you haven't. There's been a pretty clear knowledge at the end of each season. Okay, either we've gotten to the point in the last few years where a couple times we knew that there was going to be a change in the big office. There was going to be a change at the top. This was a year where it was just hanging out there, and you were not sure. And they said they were discussing a new contract, but there was no guarantee that 6 seasons in that Jim Harbaugh was going to absolutely, without question, be the head of Michigan football going forward. They got that done. And then all of a sudden we get this wave of new coaches. And it's a time for Michigan football fans to, if you're a great optimist, you look at the new energy of the coaches and you think, okay, this is going to be the turning point. This is going to be a really big deal because you're bringing in younger coaches, you're bringing in lots of energy, you're bringing in great recruiting prowess. But if you are a little more on the cynical side, you say, okay, they've cleaned the cupboards. Now, are they going to be able to stock them better and produce a better menu? Because that was a rough go this past year. Obviously, COVID interrupted, but some teams carried on, and one in particular that you have to knock off made it to the final game of the college football season. So, it's a time where Michigan football fans, I don't think know quite what to expect, but that always creates a lot of interest.
Well, there's no doubt that Jim has gone with a youth movement with his new hires, John. And not only because they can coach, everyone agrees with that, but solid recruiters. And as you mentioned, that seems to be the most important thing right now, isn't it?
Well, they want to be able to compete at the very highest levels. And if you're going to be able to do that, you have to have the sort of players on the field that will and can. And you have to have what I would harken back and think of as the 1990s Michigan players, from the offensive lines of the early 90s to the Charles Woodson-led teams of the mid-90s to a guy that is going to be playing on Sunday at age 43 and in the late 90s, Tom Brady himself. They need the kind of guys that are going to go from Michigan to have great success in the NFL, and they still produce some of those. But if you are going to accomplish the goals that you want to in this Michigan program and that are demanded because of historical precedent by Michigan fans, you've got one job right now, and that's beat Ohio State. If you don't do that, you're not going to Indianapolis for a chance at the Big Ten championship. You are not going to win the Big Ten championship, and you are not going to the playoffs. And if that happens, and if Michigan stays winless against the Buckeyes, which, unfortunately for Jim Harbaugh, that's what's happened in his time, and going 500 against Michigan State, that's not good enough. And so, the saying goes, it's not the X's and O's as much as the Jimmies and Joes. Well, they've got to get more Jimmies and Joes and then prove that the X's and O's can match up against not just Rutgers, not just Minnesota, but against Wisconsin, against Penn State, and most especially against Ohio State.
Well, one of the changes I do like, John, is Jim handling the quarterbacks now. We have a lot of young guys in that quarterback room, talented, but they need to be developed. And as we heard, during the first 3 years of the Harbaugh era, even against Ohio State, you'd hear writers and critics say Michigan is a quarterback away from beating Ohio State and getting over that hump. So the development of these young guys is very, very important. And I think it's interesting to watch what Jim does with that.
Oh, there's no question. And there's nobody that knows more about quarterbacking than Jim Harbaugh. So, you're anxious to see what can be done there. What a very interesting mix, too, because, you started out last season with Joe Milton was going to be the guy. He had emerged. He had really showed what he could do to the point that he was the clear-cut winner in that quarterback's battle. And the guy that some presumed was going to be the quarterback, Dylan McCaffrey, was completely gone and now has transferred out. Much more, you're kind of in a similar, where are we now position? Joe Milton was supplanted during the season, and he was a little bit nicked up, but he gave way to Cade McNamara, and McNamara, of course, had that great game where he comes in against Rutgers and leads Michigan back to one of its 2 wins on the season, and it looks like he's going to be the guy, and then he gets banged up. Now you've got a kid that everybody's talking about in J.J. McCarthy, who is the wonderkind out of IMG Academy down in Florida, and there are those who firmly believe, okay, here's a kid that could come right in, arrive early, get ready, and be Michigan's quarterback from day one. So I'm very intrigued by not only Jim's taking over of the quarterbacks, but his decision-making in concert with Josh Gaddis, Michigan's offensive coordinator, as to, who do we hand the keys to this year?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done, no question, when spring football starts. So much to fix. And, when you look at what there is to work on, you wonder where Jim starts. But on offense, John, what would you say is job number one?
Well, offensively, you have got to establish a top quarterback and a top backup, and they have to be given the ability to have the kind of help they need up front in your offensive line. You had a situation where you just didn't have the consistency there last year, and that was in large part because of the injuries that were taking place. I mean, you lose your 2 starting tackles, and you're in a real bind right away. But they have so many good and solid young offensive linemen that you need to see them developed, and you need to see a couple really step forward. And the X factor there is the guy that has been developing these Michigan offensive lines and had done a pretty good job with several of them is now not your offensive line coach, Ed Warner, who is not going to be on this staff unless it's in a different role. He's casting about, for jobs right now, and you've got Sharon Moore, who is taking over the entire offensive line. So that's that new dynamic. What's he going to do with these young guys, and how are they going to be brought along? Will tell the story on Michigan's offensive prowess. They're always going to have backs. They've got talented backs. They have receivers that can get the job done, and they're bringing in more. But boy, the combination of getting a signal caller that can be a dominant one and doing it behind the kind of protection that you need, and establishing the kind of running game behind that offensive line that you need is going to be very telling for this offense.
You're right on with that. And I feel good about the offense, though. At least there's plenty of talent to work with, and I really do think that we're going to be pleasantly surprised in the fall. I hope, anyway. The defense, on the other hand, still has me worried. We have our young coordinator now in Mike McDonald. He has a big job on his hands, doesn't he, John?
There's no question about it, because the defense was what was the first crack in Michigan's armor this season. And, I hate to – I never talk about this without mentioning the fact that Don Brown was perhaps the most popular assistant coach that I have seen in operation in the 30 years that I've been running the Wolverine and following this thing. But as teams got onto his defenses and began to react and began to use them against themselves, that's where Ohio State, in the last two times that they played, which obviously wasn't this past fall, got to the point where they were really, Ryan Day's offense was really tearing them up. And then Michigan did not show the versatility to be able to react well against them. The cornerbacks were new this year and got picked on mercilessly. So, yeah, Mike Macdonald is going to have to bring a different approach, and I think that's at this point what Jim Harbaugh is seeking. There's no question that Mike Macdonald comes with the highest recommendation from brother to brother, because you're going from a John Harbaugh staff with the Baltimore Ravens to Jim Harbaugh's staff. And Mike Macdonald was at the heart of some really, really high-level Ravens defenses. The question becomes, was he involved enough in play calling? Was he involved at all? I don't think he was the guy flipping the switches on game day, but now he's going to be in concert with co-coordinator Maurice Linguist and these other defensive coaches that Michigan has. How's that going to work? How's it going to look? Are they going to be versatile enough to, so many years I listened to Michigan fans say, "Oh, please get us away from bend but don't break. Get us out of that."
Yeah.
Well, they weren't saying that in the last couple of Ohio State games, because the vulnerabilities of press man, aggressive all the time, especially when you can't get to the quarterback, were exposed in a big way. So I think you're going to see something that probably is a little bit more flexible and a little bit more multiple going in under Mike Macdonald. But we're very anxious to see just what form that's going to take.
Well, there is a lot to work on this spring. We know that. But have you heard any talk about when spring practice is actually scheduled to get underway?
None. And I would suspect that they would be a little bit hesitant to set it too early, just because of the present doubt that's out there. So, I mean, you're not gone, apparently, are the days of the international trips with Michigan football. So you have a little bit more flexibility. I mean, some teams do it earlier, some teams do it later. You get teams that are practicing in March, but I would think that they would want to set it a little bit later. We've got these vaccines coming out. You should be moving more and more in the direction of things being safer and safer as you go farther into the spring, which only makes sense then to play it later. But in terms of when they're going to practice, I do not know.
Well, of course, there, as you mentioned, a lot of doubt swirling around everything in the athletic department. And, another question that I get from my listeners, I know you hear this from your readers, is when will season ticket renewals be processed? And that is such a tough one to answer, because at this point, we don't have any idea even how many fans are going to be allowed in the stadium in the fall, do we?
Absolutely. And Michigan, that's not Michigan's call.
No.
Quite frankly. I mean, that's coming down from the state level. We have seen that in the state of Michigan, the closings, the shutdowns, the erring on the side of caution has been more severe than in many states of the union. So given that, it's hard to go out there and say, okay, come buy your tickets. You just don't know how much capacity you're allowing for. And therefore, that is just one more question to be answered as we go along. I have no idea how they're going to handle that one. And I'm sure that Ward Manuel is in position where he is wondering himself. He's wondering about a lot of things these days. I mean, it's one thing to be able to call the shots and run your program, but if you are doing it, waiting to hear how you're going to be able to do it from not only your superiors in the higher up organization that is the University of Michigan, but also from the state that you're living in, that's a tough deal. I mean, you wait and you see, and in the meantime, you do the best you can.
Well, that's right. Wait and see is what we have to do for a lot of things in life these days, and that's what I tell my listeners too. I'm sure they're working on a plan behind the scenes, or a variety of plans for the season, but we just have to wait. Final question for you, John, before we let you get away. It is, as we know, Super Bowl week, and there's a pretty famous Michigan alum in the Super Bowl again. His 10th appearance in the Super Bowl. Does Tom Brady have the pieces around him to take down young Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, do you think?
I honestly think he does, because they've proved it in the last couple of weeks to be able to take down the New Orleans Saints, who had beaten them twice in the regular season. That was maybe the biggest roadblock in my mind. And then to be able to go to Lambeau in the cold and beat the Green Bay Packers, I think that they have shown they're able to take down anybody in this league. No shade thrown at Kansas City or Patrick Mahomes at all. They will be a very tough opponent, and we should be in for an extremely entertaining Super Bowl and back and forth. But this is the best cast that Tom Brady has had around him offensively in many years, or maybe ever, because the New England Patriots were notoriously stubborn in their I guess ability to think they could get it done while casting off some of the top players and just replaceable parts. I take note that the fact that one of them wound up to be 42-year-old Tom Brady, who I don't think that they tried hard enough to re-sign when he did leave. But what a story. What a story to see that 43-year-old Tom Brady not only lead his team to the Super Bowl once again, a one that hadn't been there in more than a decade, but to have the New England Patriots watching it on television and saying, that guy could still be here. So no, it's just an ongoing ride that is terrific for Michigan fans who appreciated Tom Brady from the time that he was in the number 10 uniform for the Wolverines to all these years as number 12 in the NFL. Just an amazing tale of a young man who would not take no for an answer in terms of where his drive and his endless work ability would take him. And it's still rubbing off on other people and now on another team that is going to be in the Super Bowl. I think absolutely I'm going all the way with the Buccaneers this year, because I would love to see Tom bring number 7.
And I'm right there with you. I think he's going to find a way to do it this Sunday. So it should be a great game. Looking forward to it. With us on our Game Day segment this week has been Senior Editor John Borton from the Wolverine magazine. John, always a pleasure to have you on the show. There's going to be a lot to talk about in the coming weeks and months, so we will be sure to get you back on soon, and we look forward to that visit.
I do too, Mike. You always do a terrific job, and I always appreciate being with you.
On Quick Hits today, not much to talk about this week because of the shutdown, but we do have news on the recruiting front. We have flipped 4-star defensive lineman Rayshon Benny from Michigan State. Benny played his high school ball at Oak Park and is a huge get. We also flipped Garland, Texas 3-star defensive lineman Ikechukwu Owona. He had previously been a Colorado commit. Wednesday was the traditional February signing day, which has lost much of its luster since the early signing period in December was added several years ago. We are hoping this weekend all of our winter sports teams get the green light to start competing again, but nothing is for certain, as we know all too well these days. Thanks again to John Borton from the Wolverine magazine for being our guest this week. Remember, you can subscribe to the show in the iTunes and Google Play stores, or hear us on Spreaker, Radio.com, iHeartRadio, Audible, and even Stitcher. Please tell your family and friends about the show, and like us on Facebook and Twitter. I also invite you to email me with any of your Maize and Blue thoughts at the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That will do it for another week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. And until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!